My son sold my house while I was in the hospital. He had no idea I had already changed the will. I never thought my own son would wait until I was lying in a hospital bed to betray me. But that is exactly what happened. My name is Margaret Whitaker. I am 68 years old, a retired elementary school teacher from Ohio, and for 41 years, I lived in the same White House at the end of Maple Ridge Lane. To anyone else, it was just an old house. To me, it was my whole life. It was where my husband, Daniel, kissed my forehead every morning before work. It was where my 2 children took their first steps. It was where we celebrated birthdays, Christmas mornings, family dinners, and even the arguments I now remember with a strange kind of tenderness. After Daniel passed away, that house became the last place in the world that still felt warm with him. And my son knew that. Ethan knew exactly what that house meant to me. So what he did was not a mistake. It was a plan. It began on a Tuesday afternoon. I had been in the hospital for 6 days after a mild stroke. The doctors said I was lucky. I could still speak. I could still remember everything. I could still move my hands and legs. But my body felt weaker than it ever had. Every time I stood up, the room tilted. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw an old woman trying very hard not to look afraid. My daughter, Claire, came every day. She brought clean socks, warm soup, and the lavender lotion I loved. She sat by my bed, read the doctor's messages, asked if I was cold, asked if I needed another blanket, asked if I was hurting. Ethan came once. He stood at the foot of my hospital bed in a dark navy suit, holding his phone, looking like he had been forced to attend a meeting he wanted to leave. "How long are they keeping you here?" he asked. I tried to smile. "It's good to see you too, Ethan," he sighed. "I'm serious, Mom. We need to talk about practical things. Bills, the house, long-term care, long-term care." Those words made my heart go cold. "I'm going home," I said. "Maybe not," Ethan answered. "You're almost 70. The house has stairs. The roof is old. The yard is too much. You need to be realistic." I turned my face toward the window. Outside, the sky was heavy and gray. "I am being realistic. I want to go home." Ethan stepped closer. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." I looked at my son then. There was no worry in his eyes, no fear, no tenderness, only impatience. I should have seen it in that moment, but mothers have a painful habit. We explain away the cruelty of our children. I told myself Ethan was stressed. I told myself he was worried. I told myself he loved me, even if he didn't know how to show it. 3 days later, Claire walked into my hospital room with red eyes. She held her phone so tightly her knuckles had gone white. "Mom," she whispered, "did you agree to sell the house?" The room froze. "What are you talking about?" Claire swallowed hard. "I found an online property record. Maple Ridge Lane. Your house. It says it's under contract." At first, I thought she had made a mistake. Then she turned the phone toward me. There it was. My home. The front porch. The hydrangea bushes. The living room windows. And the words on the screen were clear. Under contract. I stared until the letters blurred. "I didn't sell my house," I said. Claire sat beside me. Then Ethan did. I felt the blood drain out of me. Years earlier, after Daniel died, I had signed a limited power of attorney for Ethan. He said that if I ever became temporarily unable to handle paperwork, he could help pay bills, deal with the bank, and manage urgent financial tasks. I trusted him, because he was my son, because he worked in real estate, because he had once told me, "Mom, don't worry. I'll protect this family." I had almost forgotten about that document. Ethan had not. Claire called him right there from the hospital room. He answered on the 4th ring. "What?" he said. Claire put the call on speaker. "Ethan, did you sell Mom's house?" There was a pause. Then his voice came through, calm and frighteningly flat. I accepted an offer. It was the responsible thing to do. I could barely breathe. "Ethan," I said, "you had no right," he exhaled, as if I were a stubborn child. "Mom, please, you're in the hospital. You can't live alone anymore. It was a cash offer, quick close. It was a good opportunity. That is my home. It's an asset," he said. An asset. 41 years of my life, and my son called it an asset. Claire's voice shook. "You did this behind her back." "I did what needed to be done," Ethan snapped. "Unlike you, I'm not pretending everything is fine." I closed my eyes. "How much?" I asked. "What? How much did you sell my home for?" Another pause. $380,000, Claire gasped. The house next door had sold for $520,000 6 months earlier. You undersold it, Claire said. No, Ethan replied. I moved fast. Then I heard a woman's voice in the background, Vanessa, Ethan's wife. Don't let them make you feel guilty, she said. And in that moment, I understood. This had not started when I went into the hospital. It had started long before. Ethan and Vanessa lived in a house they could barely afford. They drove expensive leased cars, posted vacation photos, ate at restaurants that charged more for a dinner than I once spent on a week of groceries, and acted as if money simply appeared whenever they needed it. But truth always leaks through the cracks. A late mortgage payment, a call from a credit card company, a small request. Mom, just this once. Over the years, I helped them more than I should have. $5,000 for a business course Ethan never finished. $8,000 for Vanessa's emergency dental work that somehow became a trip to Miami. $12,000 when they said they were about to lose the house. Every time, Ethan promised it was the last time. Every time, I believed him. Claire warned me more than once. Mom, he doesn't ask because he truly needs help. He asks because he knows you won't say no. I hated hearing that. Not because it was cruel, because it was true. After the call, I asked Claire to leave me alone for a few minutes. She didn't want to, but I told her I needed silence. When the hospital door closed, I lay there staring at the white ceiling. I thought about Ethan as a little boy. He used to run through the kitchen with muddy shoes. He cried when Daniel taught him to ride a bike and let go too soon. He once made me a Mother's Day card out of construction paper and wrote in crooked letters, I will always take care of you. I wondered when that boy disappeared, or whether I had only ever seen what I wanted to see. That night, I did not sleep. The next morning, I made one phone call. Not to Ethan, not to the buyer, not to the police. I called Harold Benson, Daniel's old friend and the attorney who had drafted our will 30 years earlier. When he heard my voice, Harold said, Margaret, I was wondering when you would call. That sentence stopped my heart. What do you mean? He was quiet for a moment. Ethan came to my office 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. Before the stroke. Before the hospital. Before I knew anything was coming. What did he want? I asked. He asked about your estate, your will, the house, and whether a power of attorney could authorize the sale of real property. I gripped the phone. What did you tell him? I told him I represented you, not him. I closed my eyes. Harold, I need help. I know, he said gently. And Margaret, listen carefully. The sale may not be valid. Your power of attorney was limited. Very limited. For the first time in days, I felt air return to my lungs. Then Harold said something else. And there is another matter. Do you remember the amendment you made last year? I remembered. After Ethan repeatedly pressured me to transfer the house into his name for so-called tax reasons, I quietly went to see Harold. I changed my will. Not out of anger. Out of fear. The house would no longer be divided equally between my children. Claire would inherit the house. Ethan would receive $1. Not because I hated him. Because I had finally understood that love without boundaries becomes permission. Harold said, if Ethan thought he was selling his inheritance early, he was wrong. I turned my face toward the window. For the first time, I did not cry. I smiled. But the real betrayal was not over. 2 days later, Ethan returned to the hospital. This time, Vanessa came with him. She wore a cream-colored coat, gold earrings, and the expression of a woman walking into a room she already believed she owned. Claire was sitting beside me, reading an email from Harold. Ethan noticed the papers immediately. What's that? My attorney's response, I said. His face changed, only a little. What attorney? Harold Benson. Vanessa's smile disappeared. Ethan forced a laugh. Mom, why are you turning this into a legal issue? Because you sold my house without my permission. I have power of attorney, Claire stood. No, you have limited authority to handle bills and emergency financial tasks, not to sell real estate for your own benefit. Ethan looked at Claire with hatred in his eyes. You always do this. You poison her against me, Claire answered. No, Ethan. You did that yourself. Vanessa stepped forward. Margaret, with all due respect, I don't think you're thinking clearly. You had a stroke. You're emotional. Ethan was trying to protect you. I looked at her. Were you protecting me when the two of you found a buyer before I was even admitted to the hospital? The room went silent. Vanessa blinked. Ethan's jaw tightened. "That's ridiculous," he said. "Harold told me you came to see him 2 weeks ago." For the first time, Ethan had no quick answer. Claire whispered, "2 weeks ago?" I kept my eyes on my son. "You planned this." Ethan's face hardened. "Fine. You want the truth?" "Yes, I planned it, because somebody had to." My chest ached, but I said nothing. He continued, "You're sitting on money you don't use. That house is falling apart. Claire can barely manage her own bills, and you act like keeping an old house is something sacred. It is my house. It should be a family asset." "No," I said. "It should be respected." Ethan laughed bitterly. "Respected? You mean worshipped. Dad is dead, Mom. That house will not bring him back," Claire shouted. "Ethan!" But I raised my hand. Those words hurt, but they also freed me, because when someone finally says the cruel thing out loud, you no longer have to pretend you misunderstood them. I looked at Ethan and said, "You're right. The house will not bring your father back, but selling it behind my back will not make you him." His eyes flashed. Vanessa grabbed his arm. "Let's go." But Ethan was not finished. "You'll regret this," he said. "No," I answered. "I regret not seeing you clearly sooner." 3 days later, Harold filed to stop the sale. The buyer backed out as soon as he learned the sale was disputed, but Ethan had already taken a deposit, $25,000, and he had already spent most of it. That was when the story changed. Suddenly, Ethan was sorry. Suddenly, Vanessa was crying. Suddenly, I was mommy in his messages again. He called me 16 times in one day. I answered once. "Mom," he said, his voice shaking, "please, if this becomes legal, I could lose my license." I was sitting at my kitchen table. Yes, my kitchen table. I had been discharged that morning, and Claire had brought me home. The house smelled of dust, old wood, and lavender floor cleaner. It smelled like mine. "You should have thought of that before you forged my consent," I said. "I didn't forge anything." "Ethan." There was silence. Then he whispered, "I was desperate." There it was. The word manipulators save for the end. Desperate. As if desperation could turn betrayal into survival. As if needing money gave him the right to steal another person's dignity. "I have been desperate too," I said. "When your father died. When I raised you and Claire through grief. When I sat in this house wondering how I would pay medical bills. But I never stole from my children." He started to cry. Or at least he wanted me to think he did. "Please don't do this to me." I looked at Daniel's old chair, empty, and somehow I did not feel alone anymore. "I am not doing anything to you, Ethan. I am allowing you to face the consequences of what you did to me." He hung up. A week later, Ethan came to the house. Claire was with me. So was Harold. Ethan looked thinner, tired, but under the apology, I could still see anger. Vanessa waited in the car. Of course she did. Ethan stepped into the living room and looked around like a stranger. "I grew up here," he said. "Yes," I answered. "You did." He touched the edge of the fireplace. "Dad taught me to throw a baseball in the backyard. I remember." His voice cracked. "I don't know when I became this person." For a moment, I saw the boy again. Not clearly, only like a shadow. And that is the most painful part of betrayal. It does not hurt because it comes from a monster. It hurts because it comes from someone who still carries pieces of the person you once loved. Ethan sat down. "I need you to withdraw the complaint." Harold leaned forward. "Margaret has not filed a criminal complaint. She has only challenged the sale." Ethan looked at me quickly. "Yet." That word sat between us like a knife. I said, "I am willing to do one thing." His eyes lifted. "You will return the buyer's deposit." "Mom, I don't have the money anymore." "Then you will sign a repayment agreement." He nodded quickly. "Fine. Yes. Anything. You will give up all authority connected to my finances. Yes. You will never ask me for money again." His face tightened. But he said, "Yes. And you will understand that my will has changed." The room went still. Ethan stared at me. "What does that mean?" "It means Claire will inherit this house." His face went blank, then ugly. "All of it? Yes, and me?" I held his eyes. $1. His mouth opened slightly. Claire looked down. Harold said nothing. Ethan stood up. "So that's it? I make one mistake and you cut me out?" Something inside me finally broke, but it broke cleanly. "One mistake?" I said. "You planned to take my house while I was sick. You lied to your sister. You used my condition against me. You spent money that did not belong to you." "That is not one mistake." That is a series of choices. His face reddened. You always loved Claire more. No, I said. Claire loved me without trying to own me. He looked at me as if I had slapped him. Maybe I had, with the truth. That day, Ethan left without signing anything. But 2 weeks later, he signed. Not because he had suddenly become good. Because Harold made sure he understood what would happen if he did not. The house remained mine. The buyer was repaid under a legal agreement. Ethan lost every right to handle anything connected to me. And Claire? Claire did something I will never forget. One evening, while I sat on the porch wrapped in Daniel's old cardigan, Claire brought out 2 cups of tea. She sat beside me and said, "Mom, I don't want the house if it means losing Ethan forever." I smiled sadly. "You didn't lose Ethan because of a house." She looked at me. "Then why?" "Because he believed love meant access. And when access ended, he called it betrayal." Claire cried quietly. I held her hand. Months passed. My strength slowly returned. I hired a gardener. I repaired the roof. Claire came every Sunday. Some days we painted the fence. Some days we cooked. Some days we simply sat in the living room and let the house breathe with us. Ethan did not call for a long time. Then, on Christmas Eve, a card arrived. There was no return address. Inside was one sentence. "I'm sorry, I became someone Dad wouldn't recognize." I read it 3 times. Then I placed it on the mantel beside Daniel's photograph. Claire asked if I was going to call him. I said, "Not yet. Forgiveness is not a door you open just because someone knocks. Sometimes forgiveness is a window. You look through it. You see who is standing outside. And you wait to know whether they came back with love, or only because their hands are empty. I am still waiting. But I am waiting in my own home. And that makes all the difference." I thought that once Ethan signed away his financial authority, the worst was over. I was wrong. One Monday morning, Claire came to the house earlier than usual. She did not ring the bell. She used the spare key I had given her years before. I was in the kitchen making coffee. The moment I saw her face, I knew something was wrong. "Mom," she said quietly, "you need to sit down." I set the spoon on the counter. "What did Ethan do now?" Claire did not answer right away. She placed a stack of papers on the kitchen table. On top was a printed email from a private lending company. I read the first line, then the second. And for a few seconds, my kitchen disappeared. Ethan had not only tried to sell my house, he had used my house as collateral for a loan, a $150,000 loan. I looked at Claire. "That's impossible." Claire swallowed tears. "Harold checked the county records. There's a secondary lien that was filed recently. The signature is under your name." I picked up the page. At the bottom was my signature, Margaret Whitaker. But it was not my signature. I know my own handwriting. I signed report cards, school forms, birthday cards, insurance papers, and thank you notes to parents for more than 40 years. This signature was too smooth, too strong, too eager to look like mine. I sat down. There are moments when pain stops feeling like pain. It becomes emptiness. You do not scream. You do not shake. You just sit there, staring at the proof in front of you, and realize that the person you gave birth to, raised, defended, forgave again and again, has gone further than you ever allowed yourself to imagine. Claire knelt in front of me. "Mom, look at me." I looked at her. "I'm fine," I said, but my voice sounded like someone else's. Claire shook her head. "You don't have to be fine." That sentence made me cry. Not because of the loan, not because of the house, because I was tired. Tired of being the strong mother. Tired of forgiving. Tired of finding reasons for wounds my son kept opening. Harold came that afternoon. He sat at the dining table, removed his glasses, and spoke slowly. "Margaret, this is much more serious," Claire asked. "Is it forgery?" Harold nodded. "It certainly appears to be. And if so, Ethan is no longer facing only a civil problem. This could become criminal." I was silent. Harold looked at me. "I can continue protecting the house. But if we bring this evidence forward, Ethan could lose his license, his job, and possibly face prosecution." Claire turned toward me. There was anger in her eyes, but fear too. Whatever Ethan had done, he was still Claire's brother. And whatever Ethan had done, he was still my son. That night, I did not sleep. I walked slowly through the house. The living room, where Daniel used to read the Sunday paper. The staircase, where Ethan and Claire once slid down wrapped in blankets. Ethan's old bedroom, now holding a single bed, a few boxes, and a dusty baseball trophy. I turned on the light. The room smelled of old wood and time. On the bookshelf, I found a shoebox. Inside were things Ethan had left behind from high school, a photo in his baseball uniform, a cheap medal, and a letter he had written to Daniel when he was 13. "Dad, when I grow up, I want to be a man like you." I sat on the edge of the bed and read that sentence for a long time. Then I cried. Not because I missed Daniel, because I realized Ethan had not only betrayed me, he had betrayed the father he once wanted to become. The next morning, I called Harold. "Prepare everything," I said. The line was quiet. "Are you sure?" I looked out at the backyard. The maple tree Daniel planted the year Ethan was born still stood there, its roots deep in the earth. Through every winter, it had remained. "I'm sure," I said. "But before we act, I want to see Ethan one last time." I invited Ethan to dinner on Friday night. No Vanessa, no Harold, no attorneys. Just me, Ethan, and Claire. Ethan arrived at 6:15, 15 minutes late. As always, he walked in guarded, wearing a gray shirt without a tie. He no longer looked like the confident man who had stood in my hospital room weeks earlier. He looked at the table. I had cooked Daniel's favorite meal: pot roast, mashed potatoes, and green beans with butter. Ethan stopped. "Why did you make this?" "Because this may be the last dinner we eat together as a family," I said. Claire's hand froze as she set down a glass of water. Ethan looked at me. "What is that supposed to mean?" I pointed to his chair. "Sit down." Dinner began under a heavy silence. The sound of forks against plates seemed louder than usual. Ethan barely ate. Claire almost did not eat at all. I ate slowly, one bite at a time, as if memorizing the last time I would serve dinner to a son who no longer understood gratitude. After a few minutes, Ethan set down his fork. "Just say what you want to say." I wiped my mouth with a napkin. "I know about the loan." His face went white. Claire looked down at the table. I continued. "I know you used my house as collateral. I know that signature is not mine." Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. This time, he could not say he did it for me. He could not say he was protecting the family. He could not say I was not thinking clearly. The forged signature sat between us, even though no one had placed it on the table. Finally, Ethan whispered, "I was going to pay it back." 3 weeks later, Ethan sat before the state real estate licensing board. I did not have to be there. Harold said I could stay home. Claire said the same. But I went. Not for revenge, not to watch him be humiliated. I went because throughout my life as his mother, I had shown up for every important moment. His first day of school, his first baseball game, graduation, his wedding. And now, I showed up on the day he had to look directly at who he had become. Ethan walked into the room in an old suit. Vanessa was not with him. I later learned she had left 2 days earlier with a suitcase and some jewelry, leaving a note that said, "I can't stay when everything is falling apart." I was not surprised. Some people love you only while the lights are on. When the room goes dark, they are the first to find the door. Ethan sat before the board. His voice trembled as he spoke. He admitted he had misused the power of attorney. He admitted he had allowed loan documents to move forward based on an invalid signature. He admitted he had hidden information from me. Not once did he say, "But I did it for my mother." Not once did he blame Claire. Not once did he mention Vanessa. When they asked why he had done it, Ethan was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Because I thought that if I was desperate enough, I had the right to do something wrong." The room went silent. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling, not from anger, from sadness. At the end of the hearing, the board suspended Ethan's license pending further investigation and ordered him to complete several mandatory conditions before any reinstatement would be considered. Ethan stepped into the hallway. He saw me. We stood several feet apart. I did not know what to say. Neither did he. Finally, Ethan said, "I thought you wouldn't come." I answered, "I once thought you would never do any of this." He lowered his head. "I'm sorry. This time, the apology sounded different, smaller, less dramatic, less like a tool. But I still did not hug him. Not because I did not love him, because a wound needs time to learn whether an apology is real. I said, "I hope you become someone whose apology deserves to be believed." Ethan nodded. Then he left. Claire stood beside me and took my hand. "Are you okay?" she asked. I watched Ethan disappear through the glass doors. No, I said, but I am free. Bloom brightly in the summer. I do not move as quickly as I used to. My right hand still tingles sometimes when the weather turns cold. But I make my own coffee each morning, water my flowers, and open the living room windows to let the sunlight in. Claire still comes every Sunday. She no longer asks about the will. She no longer mentions the house. That makes me even more certain I chose correctly. One autumn afternoon, Ethan called. I stared at his name on the screen for a long time before answering. "Hi, Mom," he said. "Hello, Ethan." His voice sounded lower than before. "I'm not calling to ask for anything." I said nothing. He continued. "I just wanted to tell you I started working at a building supply store. It's not a big job, but I paid part of the debt this month." I sat by the window. "That's good. I'm also going to therapy. Every Wednesday." I looked out at the maple tree. "That's good," I said again. Ethan was quiet for a moment. "I know you can't trust me yet." "That's true. I won't ask you to." That was the first sentence in a long time that made me feel something in Ethan might be changing. Not because he apologized, because he did not ask to be rewarded for apologizing. Before he hung up, he said, "Can I come visit, Dad?" I understood what he meant. Daniel's ashes were buried beneath the maple tree in the backyard, where he once said he wanted to rest. "You can come Sunday afternoon," I said. "Claire will be here too." "Thank you, Mom." That Sunday afternoon, Ethan came. No suit, no Vanessa, no false confidence. He brought a small bouquet of flowers. He stood beneath the maple tree for a long time. Claire and I watched from the porch. No one spoke. Then Ethan bent down and placed the flowers at the base of the tree. From where I stood, I saw his shoulders shake. Claire whispered, "Do you want to go out there?" I shook my head. "Not yet. Some distances should not be erased too quickly. Some bridges have to be rebuilt one board at a time. If you build too fast, they collapse again." That night, after Ethan left, I turned on the porch light. The warm yellow glow fell across the old steps. The house was quiet, but it was no longer lonely. I stood in the living room and looked at the photographs on the wall. Daniel smiling in an old picture. Claire at 7, missing 2 front teeth. Ethan in his baseball uniform, mud on his face, eyes bright as if the world were still simple. I did not take Ethan's picture down. Someone once asked me why. I said, "Because removing a photograph does not erase the pain, but keeping it does not mean I forgot." That is what I learned. You can love someone and still put a lock on the door. You can forgive in part and still keep distance. You can pray your child changes without handing him the keys to your life again. Love is not permission for someone to enter whenever they want. Real love knows how to knock. Real love knows how to wait. Real love knows how to respect the answer. Not yet. If you are listening to this story, maybe you have been betrayed by someone you never thought would hurt you. A child, a sibling, a spouse, a parent, or someone who once called you family. And maybe you are still asking yourself, if I set a boundary, does that make me cruel? No. You are not cruel for protecting yourself. You are not selfish for keeping what belongs to you. You are not wrong for saying enough to someone who has used your love as permission to wound you. Real family does not wait until you are weak to take what you love most. Real family does not call your resistance betrayal. Real family does not make you choose between a roof and your dignity. I almost lost my house. But the more frightening truth is this. I almost lost myself. I almost said, "It's okay." I almost thought, "He is my son." I almost used motherhood to cover the choices of a grown man. But this time, I did not. I kept the house. I kept the will. I kept my boundaries. And most importantly, I kept myself. That night, before bed, I locked the front door. Then I rested my hand on the doorknob for 1 extra second. Not because I was afraid someone would come in, because for the first time in a long time, I understood that I had the right to decide who enters my life, even if that person carries my last name, even if that person calls me Mom. I turned off the living room light. Only the porch light remained outside. The house at the end of Maple Ridge Lane still stood there, old, scratched, weathered, but steady, just like me.